Hi there guys, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if this is your first time. This week I'm going to do a quick review of the new album by Modern English. Hi there guys, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if this is your first time, and if it is your first time, don't forget to hit like and subscribe below. It really does help the channel grow. Now, back in the early 80s, I was heavily into post-punk, listening to bands such as Joy Division, Bauhaus, the Chameleons, the Psychedelic Furs, to mention just a few, and amongst those bands sat Modern English. Now, I discovered Modern English courtesy of a good friend of mine who played me the excellent Gathering Dust single, and then their first Mesh and Lace album back in the early 80s. From then on, I was hooked. I immediately bought Mesh and Lace and anything else I could lay my hands on. Modern English were formed in Essex in 1979 and were initially signed to 4AD Records that same year, which enabled them to record and release their debut album Mesh and Lace in 1980. Those that watch my channel will know that I highly rate Mesh and Lace as likely the band's best album. It's dark, moody, industrial, aggressive and meticulously recorded, including sound effects that wouldn't sound out of place on a Hawkwind album. Joy Division on steroids is how I normally sum up Mesh and Lace. It's just a great album. As an aside, Mesh and Lace was, a few years back, remastered by none other than Kevin Gray and released via Drastic Plastic Records via QRP, the end result being an amazing sounding record of which I have a copy. This is on dark green vinyl and it is absolutely fantastic. They followed Mesh and Lace up in 1982 with After the Snow, which features their hit single I Melt With You. Now, this album has a more commercial, new wave feel to it and is in stark contrast to the first album. This album cemented their fan base in the US, which grew following the release of After the Snow, and specifically I Melt With You, which reached number 7 on the US Billboard rock chart in 1983. A few more albums came and went, as did band members. By the time we get to 1986 and the Stop Start album, the band were in a flux and producing music that was in essence lackluster pop music. It didn't make the album charts in the UK and barely scratched the surface of the top 200 in the US, which is where the band's main fan base was at the time. It was likely just after that album's release that they split. So now, moving on to the 90s, and Modern English were now basically the trading name for Robbie Gray's solo career, mainly touring around the United States with various session musicians filling in the gaps behind him. The rest of the band busying themselves with other things, like Steve Walker running a fairly successful used record business. He has a Discogs shop, you know, and I'll share that in the description below. While Gary McDowell, the guitarist, decamped to Thailand to ride big motorcycles. By 2010, the original members, bassist Mick Conroy, keyboard player Steve Walker and guitarist Gary McDowell, had rejoined Robbie Gray to tour the United States as a new rejuvenated Modern English. Original drummer Richard Brown had, by all accounts, been approached to rejoin, but unfortunately declined the offer. Now, in 2011, I went to see them play at the Colchester Arts Centre, an excellent venue in Colchester, Essex, which is an old church complete with stained glass windows. The band were on excellent form that night, and I knew from then on they were back in business. Now we fast forward to February 2024, and we come to their latest album, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, they haven't said why it's called 1, 2, 3, 4, but I suspect it's a tongue-in-cheek poke at singers or drummers counting songs in with 1, 2, 3, 4, or worse, the classic 1, 2, 3, 4 test test that singers do during sound check. Either way, it's quite funny and a little bit of fun. Now, 1, 2, 3, 4, as I said, was released in February 2024 and I got my copy via Amazon. If you're feeling flush with cash, you can still visit the band's website, modernenglish.me, where they're selling both CD and vinyl variants. Now, the vinyl variant, they got a version on there which is signed by all the band for a few more quid than normal. But what's the album like? Now, like I say, got mine from Amazon. And here is the album itself. It's a matte cover, it's not shiny, glossy or anything like that. It's a gatefold. Now let me just show you the gatefold. There's the album at the front and the back. There's the gatefold. Now, it's a limited edition on vinyl, and this comes in fluorescent. It comes with a poly-lined inner, but it comes on fluorescent yellow vinyl. Now, you can't actually see on camera the brightness of that yellow, but trust me, it's bright. It is bright, and like I say, it comes in a poly-lined inner, which is nice. There's record companies out there that palm us off with rubbish paper inners, and they shouldn't really do that. I've kept the shrink, as I do with all my records, and there's the shrink and the hype sticker. 2024 new studio album by post-punk icons. Coloured vinyl includes Long in the Tooth, Crazy Lovers, Not My Leader. My son's watching football. Now, having listened to this album several times, both on my turntable and streaming on Spotify, yuck, while shopping in Tesco's, I can say with some authority that this album is a true return to form for the band. To me, it harkens back to Mesh and Lace and After the Snow, the band's 4AD glory years in my opinion, and it comes highly recommended by me. I'm unsure if this album was crowdfunded like Take Me to the Trees was from 2016. That album also being another return to form, albeit with questionable production or mastering. There's something wonky about that album, at least to my ears. Now, 1, 2, 3, 4 is a much punchier and more dynamic record, highly likely recorded digitally, tape being financially restrictive these days for most bands. 1, 2, 3, 4 has got a depth to it which has been missing from their last few efforts. There's nostalgia with some of the keyboard sounds and effects, revisiting some of the old Mesh and Lace sounds of old, but they don't sound old, they sound new and fresh. Thanks totally to Steve Walker. Steve to me is a textural keyboard player who delivers textures and soundscapes as well as straight ahead keyboard lines. Now, Gary McDowell to me shines on this album. As a guitarist growing up, I was always fascinated with his playing on the first album, Mesh and Lace. Not a virtuoso by any means, but very inventive and someone I'm not ashamed to say I aspired to be like in my early days as a guitar player. Along with John McGeoch, Gary was a huge influence on me. His playing on 1, 2, 3, 4 is no different, and I feel he's finding his voice again as a guitarist on this album. Not that he didn't really shine on the others, but the 80s output were more synthy, where he was lost in the mix more or less. Now he's more front and centre, feedback and crunching guitars, just sounds good to me. If it's post-punk bass lines you're looking for, look no further. Mick Conroy is a great bass player, period, and he's criminally overlooked in favour of the likes of Peter Hook and Simon Gallup, to name just two. Mick has this uncanny knack of churning out fantastically melodic bass lines to order, it seems. Everyone on this album is a masterclass of melody, and a lot of bass players could learn a lot from this man. Finally, we get to Robbie Gray. I remember writing to 4AD years and years ago asking him to pass my letter on to Robbie Gray, as I wanted him to tell me what the lyrics were to Gathering Dust, as I couldn't work them out from listening to the record. This must have been in the mid-90s. I didn't hear anything for months, maybe almost a year I guess. Then one day the postman dropped a letter on my mat. I opened it. It was from Robbie Gray. Handwritten, the complete lyrics of Gathering Dust, together with his brief synopsis of why he wrote it and what it's about. I cherished that letter for years. I kept it in my 7-inch single sleeve of Gathering Dust. That record ended up being sold at a boot sale in the early O's, complete with that fucking letter, which I forgot was in the sleeve. If you're watching this and you have that letter, please get in touch, as I'd love to get it back, obviously for a price. But the bottom line, Robbie is a great guy. That obviously has time for his fans. His vocals on this album are no different to his vocals on any other modern English record. They're great. There are elements of old too, like his voice being manipulated through a filter to make it sound like a megaphone. This is very much like old school Robbie. Think Black Houses from Mesh and Lace.
Let's keep it up.
I think this album is a return to a more experimental modern English, and that's only a good thing. I'm a bit late to the party on this album, having missed it on release in February, but better late than never. However, aside from all the greatness on this album, there are a few issues. The record opens with Long in the Tooth. This was written by Robbie Gray and is a good opener to the album with the aforementioned. On listening to this track though, something was off to my ears. It sounded a bit distorted. So I loaded the ripped files into my mastering software and the result was shocking. I'll post it on the screen now. The waveform is non-existent. The track is brick-walled with compression, so much so that there are literally no dynamics at all. It's all just the same. I'm wondering if that's the sound they were going for. Personally, I hate it when engineers do that. I really don't understand why they do it. Next is Not My Leader. We're getting into the realms of classic modern English with this track. High melodic bass line a la Peter Hook style. The chorus sounds like it wouldn't be out of place in the 1980s Brat Pack movie. It has got a slightly dated feel to it and sound, but it's still not a bad song. It's just not one of the high points on the album for me. Not Fake is next, and another 1, 2, 3, 4 brings us into this classic sounding song that to my ears hark back to the Mesh and Lace and After the Snow era. Great chorus with Steve Walker's hawk-windy sounding keyboard sounds. Good driving bass line in this with Robbie's almost trademarked by now filtered vocals. Generally all the tracks are worth merit with obvious influences from The Cure, New Order et al, but some are stronger than others. Tracks like Exploding, Genius, Out to Lunch and Voices and the aforementioned Not Fake being the high points of this album for me. All in all, I can recommend this album. If you're into 80s post-punk new wave, it's a strong return to form for the band that generally went under the radar in the UK during their initial tenure in the 80s. They're back and I'm all the more glad for that. And that's Modern English 1, 2, 3, 4, the new album. If you want it, it's on Amazon and any other decent record outlet. Highly recommend it if you're into that sort of stuff. With that said, I'd like to say thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next one.